Chapters 10 through 18 of the book of Luke are known to Bible scholars as Luke's travel narrative. And within that section are some of the most well-known stories of the Bible. There are the parables of the Good Samaritan, the rich fool, the persistent widow, and the story of Mary and Martha. And there's today's story about the rejection of Jesus and his disciples by the Samaritans. It's called a travel narrative because Luke arranges his gospel in such a way that all these events and stories took place while Jesus and his disciples traveled from their homeland of Galilee in the north country to Jerusalem in the south country. We'll be looking at a few more of them over the next several weeks. But in our eagerness to plow ahead into the more familiar stories of Luke, it's easy to overlook this morning's brief account beginning in the 9th chapter and 51st verse. An important story about prejudice and tolerance. And what better topics to talk about on Pride Sunday than prejudice and tolerance? Our story opens up by saying that Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem. That's an Old Testament way of saying that he was resolved to do it. He made his decision and he was determined to stick to it. Jesus was determined to accomplish God's will wherever it led. The LGBT population has set its face toward equality. We are moving toward a day and time in which there truly exists within this country and others liberty and justice for all. But we're not there yet, are we? No, we're not. It would seem to some of us that we have had more than our share of setbacks. Over the next 9 chapters of Luke's travel document, we will find Jesus at different locations around the countryside, but continually moving in the same direction toward Jerusalem. For the LGBT community also, it sometimes feels as if we are all over the map. Sometimes it feels as if we have been waylaid by our opponents. And sometimes it feels as if we're simply taking a rest. And sometimes it feels as if we are forging ahead with a purpose. But wherever we are, we have faces set in a common direction, the direction of equality for all people. But there seems to be a lot of opposition, doesn't it? There was certainly opposition in this morning's story for Jesus and his merry band of followers. You see, Galilee, the home turf of Jesus and his disciples, was in the north, and Jerusalem, their destination, was in the south. And Samaria lay between the two. Samaritans were traditional enemies of the Jews. In Jewish eyes, Samaritans were half-breeds, ethnic traitors, bad guys. The Samaritans and Jews did not mix with each other, nor did they intermarry with each other. They even had different centers of worship, different capital cities, and different Bibles. But none of that seemed to stop Jesus from doing the prudent, safer thing. The prudent thing would have been to avoid Samaria altogether. The safer thing may have even been to abandon their plans to go to Jerusalem this year, or at least to delay them until things were looking better. But Jesus, seemingly throwing caution to the wind, moved forward, confronting his opposition. And why? Because his face was set toward Jerusalem. That's why. He knew what the consequences would be. It's not that it was a surprise or anything. Josephus, the Jewish historian who lived a few decades after the time of Christ, offered a secular, non-biblical view of the Samaritans. He had this to say: "It was the custom of the Galileans when they came to the holy city at the festivals to take their journeys through the country of the Samaritans. On their route lay a village called Gineah, which was situated on the border between Samaria and the Great Plain. And at this time, certain persons fought with the Galileans and killed a great many of them." And why would these Samaritans be so nasty? Why would they have a problem with someone just traveling through town? It was because of his face. His face, you see, was set toward Jerusalem, and not where it should have been set, in their opinions anyway. It offended the Samaritans that Jesus' face was resolved to go to Jerusalem rather than Mount Gerizim, which for them was their holy city. In the minds of the Samaritans, Jesus was heading in the wrong direction. He should have been resolved to go to Mount Gerizim, which Samaritans believed was the true and proper place to worship God.